Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Housing Committee. Members of the public may like to follow on @London Assembly on social media and use the hashtag HousingLondon for this meeting. Please may I remind you to silence your electronic devices, and can I ask our guests to position the mics quite close to your mouth when you speak, and if you move the unit, pick it up from the base. They get very worked up if you lift it up from the neck. Our main item of business this morning is the Affordable Housing Programme 21 to 26. I will need to leave before the end of the meeting, about 11 o'clock, to join the Cost of Living Conference, in which I am also a member, and therefore I will hand over chairing of this meeting to the Deputy Chair, which is Assembly Member Sem Moema. Can I ask our clerk, Diane Clerk, if there are any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Assembly Member Cooper today, for whom Assembly Member Baker will be substituting.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out in item 2 and ask members if they have any other interests to declare?
Noted.
Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of June 2023?
And there's two.
Sorry, and the 19th of July?
Yes.
Thank you. Can we note the completed and outstanding actions arising from our previous meetings?
Yes.
Can we note recent actions taken by me as chairman under delegated authority in consultation with party group leads members to agree the committee's affordable housing programme infographic 2016 to 2023?
Noted.
Can we note the responses from the Mayor to the committee's letter on resident voice in social housing and the committee's exempt supported housing report?
Noted.
That brings us to our main item of business, the Affordable Housing Programme 2021 to 2026. Given my departure at 11 a.m, I would like to start by taking the delegations of authority at this point. Can we delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group leads to agree any output arising from the upcoming decisions on Affordable Housing Programme 2021 to 2026?
Agreed.
Can we agree a standing delegation to the chairman of the Housing Committee in consultation with party group lead members to approve the annual Affordable Housing Monitor?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you to the members and a very warm welcome to our guests. Can I start by saying hello to Hakeem Okineshe, Director of Housing, London Borough of Brent; Clare Miller, Chief Executive of Clarion Housing Group; Fiona Fletcher-Smith, Chair of G15 and Executive Chair of L&Q; Tom Copley, Deputy Mayor for Housing and Residential Development; Tim Stair, Executive Director for Housing and Land GLA; and Heather Juman, Interim Assistant Director Housing and Land GLA. I want to apologise if I've butchered anybody's name, but please treat me with kid gloves. Right, as is our tradition on our committees, as a chair I will ask the first question, and I'd like to address this question to the Deputy Mayor, and of course if anybody else would like to support the Deputy Mayor, I'm sure he'll indicate to you. 2 years of a 5-year programme have been lost. What is realistic for GLA to deliver from this starting point onwards?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to the Assembly members. So the Mayor continues to be committed to delivering affordable homes for Londoners, and that is especially important in a context where we know now that 1 in 23 children in London, that's 1 child in every average London classroom, is living in temporary accommodation. And so meeting the previous target of 116,000 affordable homes by the 31st of March of this year was an extraordinary achievement in spite of all the major headwinds out there, and a testament to the hard work of our delivery partners, 3 of whom are on the panel today. But of course, as you say, Chair, we're here to talk about the 21 to 26 Affordable Homes Programme, and I'm keen to speak frankly to the committee about the frustrating delays that we have dealt with as part of trying to get this programme up and running. Delays that have largely been caused, I must say, by DLUC and the government that prevented us from signing contracts for nearly a year, which is partly what has required us to do a major reprofiling exercise of many bids, which I'll be coming on to. I'd also like to speak to the committee today about the extremely unfavourable market conditions, which has also led to some unavoidable delays, especially when set against the aforementioned DLUC sign-off processes. So experts are now forecasting a decline in house building, and that's house building across the board, not just for affordable housing delivery partners, but for home builders up and down the country. And these macroeconomic headwinds were felt particularly acutely after the September 2022 mini-budget, which landed in the untimely context of an economy already struggling with the impacts of COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, and Brexit. And I trust that my fellow external panel members will also be able to explain some of the practical realities of dealing with these challenges and the impact that that's having on the supply of new pipelines. So in response to these challenges, I've convened the London Housing Delivery Task Force several times, firstly in December last year and then twice again in August and September this year. And the aim of bringing together this group, which brings together leaders from across the housing sector, the aim has been to drive forward collective lobbying within the sector to try and convince government to intervene to help in these very, very difficult times. My team has also successfully negotiated with the government to win major flexibilities to the Affordable Homes Programme to maximise delivery of the programme. And we continue to push for more AHP flexibilities, including through the work of the London Housing Delivery Task Force. But ultimately, it must be said that there are many factors, many delivery challenges that are simply beyond the Mayor's control. And we would be grateful, of course, if the committee could amplify the scale of these challenges through your work and through this committee investigation, which is particularly timely given the timing of the upcoming autumn statement later this month. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you for your answer, Deputy Mayor, and we certainly will try to amplify it as a committee, because we do accept there are challenges. But there is some. Your answer makes it everybody else's issues, not your own. Speaking to your team, there was an admission that their focus on delivering your previous housing target meant that they had no time, no capacity, had no focus on delivering this forthcoming target. So do you believe your team lacked the capacity, or you had not done enough work for your previous housing target? What was it that took all your attention away to deliver that one target?
No, I don't. Well, just to be clear, we actually laid on more capacity on a temporary basis within the Housing and Land Directorate in the months leading up to the 31st of March deadline, in recognition of the fact that it did require a huge amount of heavy lifting, as I'm sure you would all understand, to get us to that very high number. But throughout that time, work was ongoing on the 21 to 26 programme. And to give you sort of a bit of a timeline, of course, we opened for bids back in April 2021. We reviewed the bids in June 2021. We were all ready to get into contract with our delivery partners, and then the government, there was some sort of dispute between DLUC and the Treasury, and we were told, hold it, no contracts to be signed. And then I think it was it October last year, Heather, that we finally had the green light to get into contract. And bear in mind, we can't ask delivery partners to start homes unless the contracts have been signed. And at that point, of course, the world had changed. And costs had massively risen. The economy was in a much worse state. And so then we had to go through the reprofiling exercise. And it wasn't until 17th of July this year that final programme was signed off by the Secretary of State. It's incredibly difficult to deliver in those circumstances. There were schemes that could have started prior to the 31st of March had that huge delay caused by the government in terms of getting into contract not taken place.
So you're saying that delay with the government meant that any and all of the work you had done before that point was stopped. So you had things in a pipeline, you were ready to go, you had significant numbers. Is that what you're saying?
There were things that could have started, but had to be pushed back. And then it's worth saying as well, Chair, and what I would add, by the way, is it's not ideal running 2 programmes concurrently. That's absolutely true, but that is simply the government decided to launch the 21-26 programme when it did. It's not ideal, but there were homes that could have started. However, then of course we were also swept up with other factors like the second staircase issue, which I'm sure we'll want to come on to today. So the more that we were delayed, the more issues piled up, which then sort of pushed against actually delivering.
I get that, because in your world, I hope you would. There's always going to be an issue, always going to be a new issue, and I accept that the delay meant that you were collecting issues maybe at a pace that you naturally wouldn't have done. I think what I'm trying to focus in here, did you have a substantial or any pieces of work ready to go before these things happened? Because you had to run 2 programmes concurrently. You seem to suggest that you were doing your 21-26 programme fine, and then the government paused it. Right, that we all see that. Did you have anything in the pipeline, and if so, at what scale?
There were things that were potentially able to start prior to the 31st of March that couldn't because of the delay. That does not mean that the sort of primary focus at that time was on, understandably, delivering the programme with the hard deadline. But there was stuff that could have come through.
I'll come to you. Thank you, Assembly Member Devenish.
Very briefly, I'm prepared to give money to charity for the Deputy Mayor if you're going to hold a whole meeting without blaming the government for absolutely everything. Surely there's more that you could have done, Deputy Mayor. It's not always the government's fault. We're coming to this later, so I won't take the thunder, but there is a question later about why are you the only authority, the only part of the UK that haven't got this programme started. Everybody else seems to have managed to do so. So all I'd ask is sometimes we focus on the powers that you have and not always blame the government for absolutely everything. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that.
Was that a question or I mean, it's hard not to blame the government at the moment. I don't think it's just me that's blaming the government, Assembly Member Devenish. It's hard to find anybody who isn't blaming the government at the moment. Anyway, we won't steal your thunder. We'll come back to that.
Okay. I'll come back to you, Deputy Mayor. Let me maybe start with Clare. As delivery partners of the GLA, what is your view on how the GLA has managed the bidding and reprofiling process?
So we work very closely with the team here at the GLA. But I have to echo that, some of the challenges that we have faced in the delivery of our programme are macroeconomic and are outside the control of even, the very hard-working officers here. So to give you an example, interest rates, inflation, planning delays, these are all things that have had a significant impact on our ability as a delivery partner. Don't get me wrong, we're a housing association. Our raison d'etre for being in business is to deliver new homes, and I will do everything within the financial envelope that we have in order to maximise the output of new homes. But it is also true to say that we make decisions for the long run. So if I purchase a bit of land with the intention of building new homes on it, all of those things that I have just mentioned can mean that between the decision to buy and the process of building, the economics of that individual scheme can change beyond recognition. And that is why it is so important for us to work alongside your colleagues here at the Assembly to make sure that the support arrangements that are in place, principally through grant, help us to be able to deliver those things.
Okay, can I ask the same question to other panel members? Maybe Hakeem first.
Thank you, Chair. I'll echo Claire's words around the relationship with colleagues in GLA. My borough, Brent, we have a really, really good relationship with colleagues in GLA. There is a shared objective of us wanting to deliver really good quality and truly affordable housing for people in London. And I think the macroeconomic issues that everybody is aware of, actually, if we look back a bit, it's actually almost a good coincidence that we didn't start the program early, because at that time there was serious turbulence in the market, which then enabled us to renegotiate our targets with the GLA, and they were willing to have that discussion with us. So now we have a reduced number of homes to deliver, but at least it feels more deliverable than it looked at the time that the program was supposed to start. So I wouldn't say it's all negative that it didn't start at the time that it should.
Interesting. Thank you. Fiona?
Thank you. Now, you would expect me to say this, but the GLA team are fantastic to work with. It is not simply that I don't want to bite the hand that feeds, because as Tom and the team know, I have a fairly vicious bite behind closed doors when I need to. But I'd echo what Hakeem said. I think it really suited us all that there was a bit of a delay in signing the contracts. As charities, we can't start work on anything where we haven't got certainty of grant. And we can't do that unless there's a signed contract between the government and the GLA, and therefore between the GLA and us. But the factors that were actually occupying our minds at the time, as well as interest rates and inflation and labour shortages, which I'm sure we'll talk more about today, the G15 members are also concentrating on the safety of residents first, investing in existing homes. If I use L&Q's figures to start with, we are spending 450 million on fire safety work at the minute. And so it suited us all that there was a slight delay because we are busy investing in homes. So getting ready to build again is something that we were glad of the time, frankly, to get our house in order to go again. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very interesting to hear the pause actually have some benefit. I think Assembly Member Devonish's frustration comes from the fact that there's some of the plates that even the government can't affect, and I think sometimes the conversation is gently politicised to support people's point of view. But here we go. I think I'll put this to the Deputy Mayor. What has been the impact of having to deliver both of the programmes simultaneously?
Well, as I say, Chair, delivering two different programmes with different programme requirements overlapping is not ideal. As we've just been discussing, of course, in reality, because of the various delays, the starts on this programme didn't come in until after the end of the current programme. However, as I've set out, that doesn't mean there wasn't an awful lot of work going on, both the initial bidding round, working with partners on those bids, getting partners familiar with the different requirements of the different programmes, and still sometimes there can occasionally be confusion about the kind of tenures that we're able to fund, who is imposing different requirements, whether the requirements come from us or the requirements come from the government. There are all sorts of differences within the 21 to 26 programme compared to the 16 to 23 programme, and obviously that's taken a bit of time for delivery partners to get used to, I think, and for us to get used to as well, I think it's fair to say.
Heather might want to say a bit more about the practicalities of this, but it has been complex. The programmes are different, and not only have there needed to be a set of discussions with delivery partners, but also with government officials too. And last autumn, when we were really working very hard with the officials in DLUC to try and get the best outcomes from the 16 to 23 programme, and negotiating for some additional flexibilities there to enable us to do that. But we were also needing to have really intensive discussions around the 21 to 26 programme too, and coming to that agreement with them to enable us to rebaseline that programme and look with partners at a more realistic assessment of what their programme should be. So, and those two conversations needed to go on in parallel, and the team did incredibly well, I think, to manage that situation of that crossover. But I think they managed it very effectively indeed. But I mean, Heather will have more of that kind of practical colour.
Yeah, no, the only thing I wanted to add is it's actually very unusual for the government to offer for us to rebaseline a programme after it's commenced, and we really strongly welcomed that, and it came as a result of not only effective lobbying nationwide, but also really good information that came from our partners that allowed us to feed in and make the case for that change to be made. So we did welcome that, but the challenge, as I say, is that we did have to start it in March, and we're really very grateful to partners who were trying to do all of their year-end work and get their new bids in ready in really constrained circumstances in case of some teams that had been cut down. So we did. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, because the reprofiling does seem like a very particular piece of work.
Can I also as well, extremely grateful to partners, for everything that Heather said, and also for ultimately signing the contracts when they did, on the basis that we would reprofile, because I think that was a bit of an ask, saying sign the contracts now and then we will do the reprofiling exercise, and we will reduce your figure in order that you could be able to deliver. So very grateful to partners for that, and I completely concur with what Tim and Heather has said about negotiations with DLUC. I think there's a good relationship at an official level between our team and the officials at DLUC, and there's been some welcome changes that we've seen as a result of that.
I think my final question would be, was there any benefit, because to an outsider it might look like that the simultaneous issuing of both of these housing programmes meant that more houses will arrive, more homes will arrive more quickly. Yes, I accept it means a lot more work for you, and congratulations for getting it done, but will that ultimately be a benefit of this?
I think it's an unusual situation. I think the issue that we've got is all of this is mixed in with the, as well as the delays that we had, it's all mixed in with the general macroeconomic circumstances. And as a result of all of that, unfortunately, as you know, and we've made the committee aware, we had to reduce that headline target down from 35,000 down to a range of between 23,900 and 27,200, I think. With the consent of DLUC and Homes England were in the same boat as well. We, of course, have been pushing for the government to top up the funding to take us back to 35,000, and ideally we would like even more funding than that in order that we can support the sector to deliver at a scale which actually matches need. The final thing I would say is I think it is quite unusual in any case for two programmes to run concurrently. I think what's happened in previous years is that programmes have been rolled into each other rather than having two programmes operating sort of simultaneously, as it were. Instead of one programme, one target has simply been rolled ahead. I think it's quite unusual that we had that hard deadline at the 31st of March, where it was, use it or lose it, essentially, and then and then having that other programme running concurrently. So it was quite an unusual set of circumstances overall.
It sounds like your team and DLUC and your delivery partners rose to the challenge. So let's see. Congratulations for getting that done. I'm going to move on now to Assembly Member Baker.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the panel. It's good to see you all this morning. So I'm continuing on the similar subject on this line of questioning, and to Tom and Tom and your team. In terms of the delays in starts that have come upon from all the things we've been discussing so far, what mitigations are the GLA putting in place in order to make sure you can continue to deliver?
I'll come in first, if that's okay, and I'll bring in colleagues. So I think the first mitigation we've already sort of touched on, which was the reprofiling exercise. So that was a recognition that the previous programme that partners had bid for, the world had changed. Those numbers were undeliverable, given the rising materials costs and rising financing costs in particular. And so, we renegotiated the programme in order to reflect that and to give partners each programme that they have a much more realistic chance of delivering. We also negotiated with DLUC, as we sort of touched on, a number of flexibilities around the programme as well in order to make delivery easier. I think the key thing that came from that, the biggest change, and something the sector was really pushing for, was the change on estate regeneration. So previously the government had said that we were capping your acquisitions up to 10%. If you, unless homes, so you can't buy homes to replace on estates unless they are classed as obsolete. And that essentially rendered the estate regeneration in 21 to 26 programme very, very difficult. Michael Gove then had a complete U-turn, I would say. It was complete volte-face. And decided that, no, you must use the remainder of the programme, i.e. the bit that we haven't already allocated. You must focus that on estate regeneration instead. And they changed the rules around acquisitions and around obsolete homes and things like that in order that we could do that. I think that was very welcomed by the whole sector because it opened up a whole new set of sites that could be brought in to the programme. And the final thing I would say going forward is in reconvening the Housing Delivery Task Force, we've come up with a set of proposals to go to the government which would provide even greater support to the sector. Stuff around funding, stuff around planning and around certainty and things like that. Tim?
Yeah, it might be helpful because I've thinking about this in my own way, which is helpful for me. And I see this kind of responses at three levels. There's a kind of project level response, and that's the kind of work that happens every day between Heather's team and the teams in our partners to really try and ensure that we're finding ways to enable projects to come forward. And we were, towards the end of the previous programme, we were really in that mindset of creativity and work in that kind of joint working to make projects happen. And I think we've managed to stay in that mindset, and that's the way we're thinking about the projects. We're trying to really get some delivery this year and over the course of this programme. And Heather might want to say a bit more about that kind of project level interactions between the organisations, because I think that's at the heart of all of this. And then at a slightly higher level, the kind of work that Tom's talking about with the task force, this is where we want some tweaks to our agreement with government, where we think that we've really been pleased, as Tom says, to get the agreement from government to rebaseline the programme, and that's been so important. But there are still some other things which we would like from them. There are things around the completion long stop dates which are getting in the way of our discussions around some projects, and so we're continuing to have those kind of discussions with government, and we hope that our relationships and the kind of risk-based approach that we're trying to take with officials, so we can really see, look, here's the risk we're facing, here's the cause of that, and here's the mitigation, will continue to enable us to get some of those tweaks that we're looking for in that. And then there's that much higher level strategic thinking, again, some of which came through the task force, but we know there are some issues around long-term certainty of funding, which are really important if we're going to enable delivery successfully. We have to be able to say with certainty that we're going to have funding in the period beyond 2026, and we have to know that we're going to be able to use it flexibly. And there are some constraints which have crept into this programme and our agreement with government within this programme, which we'd like, and which we think there is a good case for removing in longer term funding. So I think we're thinking at all three of those levels to try to ensure we've got that pipeline coming through over the medium to long term.
Can I just, before I bring you in, Heather, in terms of longer term funding after 2026, what's the practical impact in not having that clear?
I mean, it just means Fiona might want to come in on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we take 2026 is less than 3 years away. The average development will take somewhere between 5 and 7 years. So because of the financial constraints we're all under at the moment, we can't make any firm decisions on that. Could I just add, one of the other areas of long-term certainty that we also need is rents. So the rent capping this year at 7%, whilst we absolutely understand the cost of living crisis makes that absolutely essential, that took 1 billion out of the G15 in terms of our ability to invest in homes or develop. Over a 10-year period, that rent cap takes the guts of 30 billion out of the sector. And that's kind of money that again, it's gone forever. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think that I'm definitely not trying to put words in your mouth. These are my words, but I think that emphasises why actually the government's position and what money they're putting in is absolutely crucial to this conversation and why it continues to come up. Heather, thanks.
So I just wanted to add that I think because the number of starts have been obviously low at the beginning of the year, in the first 2 quarters, you might think, well, it's been a bit of a lull for the GLA. I wish that was the case, and it definitely hasn't. It definitely hasn't.
Twigging the thumbs, not doing
yes,
anything.
exactly. Whereas, in fact, of course, what we've had to do is perhaps in the past we might have had this sort of more traditional relationship where we say, oh, you know, here are your targets for this quarter, and when you're going to hit that. We're not in that situation now. Partners coming to us and saying their whole programme is extremely challenging. So we are going through both on a strategic level and their programmes as a whole, but individual projects as well, saying what can we do? What can we do together? What can we help broker with other organisations? What can we do about, do we need to make some changes on tenure? Do we need to move from some extremely complex high-cost schemes perhaps to ones that are more based on acquisitions and potentially launching a right to buy back 2 programme? Can we talk about cash flow? If we pay some of these projects earlier, you'll get a bit more in the bank and we can pay a bit less later. We're really talking in detail with partners about what we can do to mitigate, to try and look at what we can do rather than what we can't do.
Thanks. That's really interesting, and it feels like that, although obviously this work now has to be done in that way because we have to continue to deliver, that the lack of certainty around funding, the delays, and because of the wider economic situation, really then generate a lot of work which is not actually directly about just getting the homes delivered in the first place. It's all about managing all the changes to that. That must be very difficult. So I'd like to go over to Hakeem, Clare and Fiona and ask, Fiona's already said a little bit of this, but what impact the delay to starts under the programme has had on your organisation's delivery. Hakeem, did you want to come in first?
As I mentioned earlier, it's given us time to rethink because of all the other issues that were happening at the time, and again enabled us to renegotiate our target, and the renegotiated number is informed by a lot of factors. And we believe that is, at the time, that was deliverable. And it enabled us also to look for more opportunities because of the macroeconomic issues. In our borough, for example, land is a rarity, and therefore we had lots of schemes where it's only 1 and 2 properties. So it gave us time to look for larger sites, and also to start talking to private developers about getting in early to purchase some of the schemes that they're building.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So I agree with my 2 colleagues, but long-term planning for us is absolutely key to having the confidence to be able to take the risks, and at the start of any development that is what we are doing. We're taking a bit of a leap of faith that, based on good relationships, we will be able to negotiate a proper settlement so that we can build out, but buying land 5-6 years ahead of a rental stream is a risky proposition, and all you can do in those circumstances is to take a sensible amount of risk. So I cannot bet the organisation in order to deliver in 5 years' time, and that's the mindset that we are in.
Thank you. Fiona, did you want to anything?
Just add a little bit of more context to all of that. Just to give you a very stark figure, in the previous affordable housing programme, L&Q built about 11,000 homes. This time round, we're only bidding for 1,000, roughly. And that has nothing to do with the quality of this team or the amount of money available. That is all to do with a number of things, which is about the fact that we will spend $3 billion over the next 10 to 15 years on existing homes. Interest rates last year, we carry a loan book of about $5 billion, so interest rates added about 200 million, or took 200 million revenue out of our business to service those loans. The cost of capital is just one of the issues. It's still uncertain because inflation didn't go down as expected yesterday, so we don't know what's going to happen to rates. Inflation, we see a headline of 6.7% yesterday, but to give you more context, inflation in construction and in repairs and maintenance runs anywhere between 25 to 43%, depending on the aspect of the work you're doing. Uncertainty generally, it's not just uncertainty about money and income streams, it's the policy uncertainty that is around at the moment, whether that's to do with second staircase or what the replacement for a gas boiler is going to be. And also, in London particularly, supply chain issues. And they run from, can you actually get the labour and materials, to we have seen some high-profile companies go bust. All of that means that we're not able to build. And just a final point, to emphasise I don't want to make this sound like a love-in, but to emphasise the flexibility that the team use in trying to solve the problem. One of the other key partners in delivery in London for housing are our local authorities. Our local authorities are burning through, this is an unscientific figure, but I'm told they're burning through about £60 million a month keeping people in temporary accommodation. We've seen a 781% increase in families spending more than 6 weeks in B&B. So local authorities no longer have the capacity they had to build. And where the GLA and the boroughs have come together with us at the G15 is to work on a very innovative project to look at those homes that we have built, for example, for sale, that we can't sell in this current market, and see if we can flip those into a different tenure that allows our local authority partners to have proper, decent homes for people rather than keeping families in B&B. And we took the idea to Tim and the team with London councils, and they have been brilliant. We haven't cracked it yet. Nowhere near cracking it. It is pushing water up a hill a bit at times, but everybody is turning their creative minds to it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fiona. And just finally, back to you, Tom. We've touched on this several times around the reprofiling of the targets, but just to see whether you can pin it down a little bit more. To what extent is the delay to the programme responsible for the target having to be reprofiled compared to all the other factors that are obviously really important as well?
It's actually a really difficult one to quantify because it's kind of all wrapped up together. I mean, the delay led...
Go on, give us a number then.
That's the one thing I can't do probably is give you a number.
No, but if you can give us a feel for how you feel those factors.
Yeah, I mean, the delay certainly pushed things down the road, which meant that, by the time we were getting to contract, partners were looking at the profile saying we can't do that. Of course, had we got into contracts at the time, it's possible that that we'd have run into the same issues, anyway down the line, because even if we got into contract, much earlier on, that wouldn't have stopped Liz Truss's mini budget, for example. I think that the macroeconomic circumstances have been themselves, the biggest challenge, but. The delays getting into contract have certainly not helped.
So it sounds like it affected it quite a lot, but we may have pretty much been in the same situation anyway.
The economy was going the way it was going, regardless of whether we got into contract.
Okay, thanks very much. Back to you, Chair.
Hakeem, did you want to make an intervention?
Oh, apologies, sorry.
It's all right.
I'm finding it very difficult to keep a whole panel in my eye line at the moment. I don't know what it is.
I mean, we might come to it later, but it's some of the things that Fiona said. That I wanted to say more on, because if there was a time that local authorities and housing associations should be building more homes and doing it quickly, it'd be now. Because the amount of money we're spending managing homelessness at the moment across London and the country, in fact, is ridiculous. And we would all be better for it if we were using that money to build new homes, but unfortunately we can't for so many reasons. So I've got a new target with the GLA at the moment, but I'm hesitating to give absolute confidence that I can deliver it. Meanwhile, in the last program, I kept asking for more money because we could build a lot more at the time. The situation is really, really dire, and I think that the government have got to, because at the end of the day, the money we're spending on managing temporary accommodation and managing homelessness generally is still public money, and in my view, that money will be better spent if it's used in building new homes, and therefore the government has got to do something about this. And we've been having those discussions, and it doesn't seem to be having any effect.
Thank you for that. Could I just bring in Assembly Member Berry?
Thank you very much, Chair. So I wanted to come back to the question about the new allocation of funding to estate regeneration, since you brought it up, Tom. So can I get this clear? This is, I mean, this actually mirrors what you said just now, mirrors an answer you gave to Assembly Member Bailey in a written question, which is 2023-3379, if you wanted to look that up. In September, but it says the same thing as roughly what you just said. And so, for clarity, the £1 billion is not new money.
No.
It's just differently allocated money from the existing pot.
To be very, very clear, Michael Gove in his speech, I mean, it was said in a way that suggested it was new money, but it's not. It's simply
that's
the
very common
remainder that we
ministers,
didn't allocate in the first bidding round. If you remember, we allocated 87% or something like that in the first bidding round.
Okay, so my question, I mean, you're still asking for more money to make a new right to buy back fund. So that money that they've said for estate regeneration is not going into right to buy back or conversions, as Fiona was talking about. But you have managed, and you already had quite a loose definition of what's obsolete, essentially. I mean, I've been talking to you about this. Any council can say these homes are obsolete and claim for the previously quite restricted obsolete homes grants. But you've now completely relaxed that, so that any estate regeneration that's the demolition and replacement can claim a full grant. That's right, isn't it? Within the £1 billion.
Can I clarify?
Go on.
So, within the programme, there is now, originally there was a 10% cap on acquisitions unless the homes were obsolete. That acquisitions cap is now 30%. However, acquisitions of second-hand homes is still at 10%. So the between 10 and 30%, that could be acquisitions of off-the-shelf. You know, developer builds a block and it's a new build and it's converted over into affordable. Second-hand homes is still that acquisitions cap within the programme of 10% unless the homes are up.
Okay, so 20% of the whole programme can now go on demolition and rebuild as part of estate regeneration.
Where did the 20% come from?
You said it was 30% acquisitions and 10% was limited to the supply side of things.
So it's 10% within that 30%. So 10% of the programme is for second-hand acquisition.
Yeah, so
on top of that, there's another 20 that could be used for off-the-peg, which would not be used for estate regeneration, because that's just buying new build blocks and converting them into affordable, which is, you know, quite standard practice.
Okay, so that's a bit better, because the worry for me with estate regeneration, and I think you agree with me, when you first had this new restriction on subsidising homes that were not net new, this was welcomed by you, welcomed by me, as something that would ensure that we were genuinely getting net new council homes. And the worry I have with putting more of the existing money into estate regeneration is that you'll be losing a home and replacing it, and it might be a bigger home, it might be a nicer home, you might have a balcony now, but still that's zero, that's net neutral. Whereas the acquisitions that we're talking about, or the conversions, they're existing homes, so they're not new homes, but they are new council homes, new social homes. But the building of new homes, that's even better, because that's net a new home and net a social home. So what you're doing, and with those three options, you're putting more of the existing money into the worst of those three options. So that's going to bring down the new council housing we get out of this scheme, is it not? I mean, I know you put a good spin on it, but that's the result.
I don't agree with you, and you sort of already touched on it, because when these homes are being replaced, they are being replaced with new modern homes that meet modern space standards. So if you look at the actual, too often we think of things in terms of units. Well, what we're delivering here is actually more council housing, even if it's a replacement unit, because generally you're replacing with higher levels of floor space. I mean, at a very minimum level, it has to be the same level of floor space, because that's what's required under the Mayor's, that's required in the London Plan. But usually what we see is a big increase in floor space, and that's because delivery partners are replacing small, obsolete units, that we would consider to be obsolete now, I think, that we wouldn't build today.
I know a lot of the residents don't consider them to be obsolete. This is part of my problem.
Can I just add something as well? The other thing, and you've heard Fiona and our other panellists speak very clearly about the costs of maintenance and repairs and things like that. I think housing associations and councils need to, look very strategically at the stock that they've got. What is it worth investing in, retrofitting, doing infill on, maybe top hatting, that kind of thing? What's it worth doing that to? And what actually is it better, given the some of the stock is reaching the end of its useful life, really, to rebuild. And I wouldn't want our partners to be diverting lots of funding into homes that really aren't that great to live in, and have reached the end of their useful life.
Okay, so there's three things I want you to go away and come back to us with in terms of the impacts of this, because what you haven't mentioned in extolling the virtues of replacing a home is the time that home is out of action, because the homelessness that Hakeem talked about isn't solved, in fact is made worse. There's additional pressure on the housing waiting lists while a home is demolished, because those people need to be decanted.
Assembly member,
so I'd like you to go away and come back to us with a figure of additional opportunity cost within the housing programme from this change. I'd also like you to go and get a view from the London Housing Panel on this, because I don't believe they were asked in advance of making this change, although obviously it came from the top down, but I'd like you to get their views and put them on record. And the third thing I'd like you to do is look at the change in the carbon impact of the programme as a whole between what it was before and what it is with this additional demolition, because I think it will have gone up, and I don't think that's the right thing to be doing at the moment either.
Can I say on your first, just on your first point, and we'll come back and write to this on the others, in terms of homes being out of action. I mean, the best practice, and this is not always possible, but the best practice for estate regen, as we know, is for a new block to be built, residents to be moved in, and then the old block to be taken down. Not always possible, not always practical, but that's the best practice. So it's not necessarily the case that a block is removed and then it's a long wait before new homes are built to replace it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm done, Chair, as long as we've got a commitment to come back to us on those points.
I mean, I'm sure, as ever, the Assembly will be diligent in writing to me with a list of questions that members have that we couldn't answer today.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Mayor. We're going to take a 2-minute adjournment so myself and the Deputy Chair can swap seats. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We'll take the next series of questions. So, Assembly Member Devonish.
Thank you, Chair. You look much younger than you did a couple of minutes ago. Good morning, panel. Before I ask my question on the thing, the most interesting subject I've thought today was Fiona's intervention when she was again talking about policy certainty. And a little birdie told me the other day that the G15 and London councils and the GLA are allegedly writing a policy document by the end of the year to go to both front benches as a kind of manifesto of what they should have in, which... and I just wondered, will that also not just have what the new government should do next year, but surprisingly, shockingly, I'm going to ask, is there anything else that the mayor could actually be doing?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So I, as new chair of G15, I'm really keen that there is much closer working between the London boroughs, G15 as housing associations, and the GLA. The GLA works really well between all parties, but I'm not sure the G15 has pulled its weight in terms of how it works with local authorities in particular. So in the preparation for an election that will come at some stage in the next 2 years, I think it's really important that London tries to speak with a single voice on what the housing issues are that face us, because, you know, Hakeem is trying to deal with homelessness in a borough. I've got empty homes. Let's try and get our stories straight on what we need as a capital. So as part of the work we will do, we will set out what matters to London. Through the London Partnership Board that the Mayor chairs, we're also looking at making the economic case for housing in London, so that it isn't just a simple shake down the magic money tree and give us all your cash, because there is economic case to be made. So we will continue to work together on that. And I'm also keen as chair to do some really practical work, and there are three practical things that we're going to try and do together. The first of them is called Project 123, which is about 1 in 23 children don't have a permanent home. What can we do between us to fix that? A second one is around skills, and that particularly focuses on skills for repairs and maintenance, as much as skills for construction, because not only do you have to be technically brilliant, but you also have to be very good at working with customers in their homes. And the final thing is around diversity and inclusion. We need to do a lot more in terms of our workforce and employment record. And G15 has a race pledge, and I'm really interested in how we work across the intersectionality of diversity issues in London to represent the people we serve.
But before Tom comes in, to be clear, there is going to be a document that maybe we could have a sight of by the end of this calendar year that says the government, whoever it is, next year, if they do all these things, they give more policy certainty and will build more homes. Is that correct?
It says a lot, and it will say a lot, particularly about the economy of London. If I give you just an example that we need to boil down to a London figure, and this is part of the work that we will do between ourselves. The Local Government Association in 2020 calculated that if we just build 100,000 social rented homes, so the equivalent of a council house, we would contribute 15 billion a year to the Exchequer. That's the sort of figure that we need to work on. London, and the rough estimates, the NHS are going to help us on these figures, the cost of poor housing in London is costing the NHS about 2 billion a year. So all of these things add up to an economic case for housing for London. Because we will hear from every political party at the moment that there is no money. But we are spending money hand over fist on housing. We are spending £60 million a month on temporary accommodation. We are spending £7 million a day keeping people we have a duty to house in hotels. There are lots of areas we are spending money badly, and I know it's really difficult to break into that, but if you added all of that up and switched it into capital, that would be a really good thing. And then the final thing for me is about Treasury orthodoxy on housing. Housing in this country is regarded as national debt. I would argue housing is national infrastructure and asset, and we should invest in it accordingly and try and switch the civil service thinking on all of this as well, which is, again, not a political issue, but a really important one for us. And housing is political, but it's got to be non-party political. It really matters for the capital. We are on our knees in terms of our housing crisis. I've worked in this sector for 35 years, and this is the worst I've ever seen it.
Thank you. I'll let Tom come in, but just to say, I also hope this paper does include alleged public sector land banking and releasing some of that land as well. Deputy
Thank you.
Mayor?
Well, yes, Assembly Member Devenish, so you are, I think, what you call a manifesto is the position statement that the Housing Delivery Recovery Task Force will be putting together, which I think we're up to about 27 signatories now on it from across the sector, which is fantastic, 25 proposals, and you'll be delighted to hear that some of them are commitments that the GLA is going to be undertaking. So it's not just for the government, Assembly Member Devenish. We are going to be looking, as we always do, at what we can do to help as well. And as Fiona, just to back up what Fiona says, we do need to have a bit of a change and a shift in the orthodoxy, because we are spending so much money firefighting the consequences of poor housing. Let's get some of that spending up front to actually delivering bricks and mortar.
Well, I never thought I'd say I agree with the Deputy Mayor, but please don't minute that. It will end my political career. So I'll ask the question on the list, Chair. This is going back to historic questions, which really I know what they're going to say anyway, but I better ask the question. Let's go. If we go back to the original target was 35,000 homes, has now been reduced from between, I think, 23,900 and 27,100. Why is the new agreed target a range instead of a fixed number? To what extent is this new target realistic without going over all the things that you said? And I have to obviously articulate my distress that we have really already gone from 116,000 in the previous programme to 35,000. To the average Londoner who's not into that level of housing detail and expertise of this panel, they will just look at that and say, what the hell? We're in a housing crisis. Is this a poverty of ambition? Deputy Mayor.
Okay, why is it a range? Because of the uncertainty out there at the moment. It's so difficult to be able to anticipate where we will finally end up because of all the economic turbulence. So that's why it's a range. We think it is a deliverable range, though. We think we can absolutely deliver within that range up to the higher end, subject to market conditions. And the reason why the target is lower, and we have gone over some of this previously, there are a number of reasons. Firstly, London got a smaller amount of money this time around than we did last time around, number one. Number two, inflation has gone up, interest rates have gone up, the economic circumstances are incredibly challenging, partners are much more risk averse for all the reasons that we've been hearing. There's also more of an emphasis on social rent in this programme. Social rent is much more expensive to deliver. We want to do more, so we actually welcome the fact that Michael Gove has agreed that we can go from what was originally agreed at 52%, then we push it up towards 60%, and now we've got sign off for between 60 and 75% social rent. Obviously, without more money coming in, though, that does mean the overall number comes down towards the lower end of the target range because it's more expensive to deliver. But to my mind, it's also the most important and the most useful. So I hope that answers your question in terms of why we've got this range, and I'll bring Tim in on this.
Just very quickly, I mean, I think we see the range target as a real win for us. I mean, this represents some flexibility which we really need. It allows us to be ambitious and to try and get the absolute most out of this situation with partners that we possibly can, but it also allows us to be realistic and to offer some higher grant levels where they're needed and where the testing has been done to show that they're needed. So the range target is really important and a really good thing for us, and it will allow us to deliver more homes overall. And just in terms of the change between 116,000 and 35,000 or 25,000, I think we do need to distinguish that there are some bits of that which are real. Grant levels are considerably higher in the current climate than they were within the old programme. The cost inflation has been huge, as we've talked about, so that's a real impact. Also, the tenure change, as Tom said, more social rent is more expensive. So again, that's a real impact on overall numbers. But there is also some presentational difference between those numbers too, and the way that the government is asking us to think about additionality. And in the presentation of those numbers is different, and that also causes some of that reduction in the number. So it's a complex picture. I totally agree. We're trying to work in the team to try and work out how we can best present those figures in order that they're as comparable as they can be, but it's not straightforward.
I think on to that last point, essentially, the government's definition of what would count towards the previous target is different as to what to count towards this target, essentially.
Yeah, and my next question to Clare, Fiona and then Hakeem, please, which we've slightly touched on, is how has the increased focus on social rent in the programme been received by the sector? Is it realistic? And my final point on that is there any way we can make it a little bit less complex? Because clearly complexity is all part of the reason why things take longer and longer.
So absolutely, I agree that social rent is what is most needed. It is, as you've just heard, the most expensive in order to deliver. But certainly for my organisation, for the last few years, 85% of our programme has gone on affordable products. But social rent has been a very small proportion of that because of the cost of it. So I very much welcome this. I think from my point of view, what we need is both some long-term certainty and some commitment to flexibility. So as things change, where it's particularly difficult to deliver things in a particular place, you need flexibility. But you also need the certainty that you've got the long-term commitment alongside it so that we can make decisions that will result in the outputs that we've already committed to.
Thank you.
I mean, I'll be stating the obvious if I say that obviously the lower the rent in any affordable housing, the better it is for the people for whom we're building those homes. But the reality is, at social rent, we will build fewer homes. At London affordable rent, we will build slightly more, and more is definitely better. The other argument I would say for London affordable rent is the consistency across London. Social rent sounds great, but it differs from local authority to local authority and housing association to housing association. But with London affordable rent, everybody gets to pay exactly the same thing wherever they're living in London. And you get more of those homes. So it's great. Don't get me wrong. As a housing professional, I want to build the best quality housing at the cheapest rent that people can afford. But I want to build more homes as well.
Absolutely. Social rent is what we desperately need. If you look at L&Q, 26% of our residents in existing social or affordable homes are overcrowded. So we've got to build something for them to move into. I think that there is also, and we'll keep going back to the economic argument about rents. If people are spending more than 40% of their income on rent, they can't do anything else. So that drag on productivity and output for the country, we've got to fix it, really. So, yeah, absolutely on social rent. And with Hakeem on I was just counting up, there are 6 different types of tenures that we get funding for. I work in the sector, and I have to have a little card with the definitions of what each one is when I go to meet anyone, because I'm very confused. I think social rent and then the sub-market sale would be the easiest 2 programmes to run. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I be cheeky and ask?
Chair, I'm sorry, we are not even a third of the way
I'll be
through
very
our
quick.
questions.
Literally very, very quick. I just wanted 2 takeaways from that. Could we have a copy of that card, Fiona, actually, just to put it in the minutes? And could we have a copy of this? You called it something else, I called it a manifesto. When could we have that? And then I'll shut up and let the chair get on with the meeting.
I'll absolutely give you a copy of my handwritten note, and good luck reading that. And I'm sure, Tim, are you ready to release?
Can I just say, I think there are probably 2 things going on. So the Housing Delivery Task Force, which Tom convened, which has met, which we've written up, and we've sent to government officials already, and I think we're due to publish shortly. Certainly you can have that position statement that's shared by 27 organisations, I think, and so we'll pass that to the committee as soon as it's published. The other thing that's happening is what Fiona referred to, which is the London Partnership Board meeting, which is happening in November, which is a special meeting on, am I right about this, or has it just happened? Just happened. So it's a special meeting on housing and the economic arguments for investing in housing. I don't really know what the output of that is going to be, but again, it's a broad range of organisations which contributed to that, and so they're 2 slightly separate things but come together.
It's although my name's on it, it's actually a GLA paper. So if you're happy, I can share it with the Assembly. Yeah, it's a really good paper, even though I didn't write it. But it sets out how we were going to make that economic case.
That would be really helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, it was to the partnership board, so I think that the chair might have to agree, but I'm sure that's fine.
You are a transparent authority. Thank you.
For Tom, Tim or Heather, can you just clarify for us, when you took the other panellist, Hakeem, mentioned London affordable rent, to nip this in the bud, when the GLA is talking about London affordable rent, it is not talking at 80% of market. Can that be...
It's not, no.
I mean, I'm aware of that,
yeah.
But it would be helpful to have a kind of a benchmark to see that the difference is not huge in the way that people will assume.
Indeed, it's well below the 80%, and the benchmark, it's benchmarked at social rent levels, and those benchmarks are published on the GLA website annually. So it should all be there on the housing and land section of the GLA website. You can see the rents for each number of bedrooms.
Thank you. Assembly Member Sheikh.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the panel. And it was helpful to hear that sort of clarification about, the fact that there's an increase on social rent or social housing is because the need for social housing and social rent is, very pertinent across London in boroughs. Endless waiting lists and people trapped in temporary accommodation makes this situation urgent. So it's good to see the sector responding to that by emphasising further need to build. I just kind of wanted to, the theme that's been running all day or so far this morning about what more is needed from the government in terms of being able to help us deliver the homes that we want to build. And to that end, I wanted to ask about the 2.2 billion that the Mayor is calling in terms of further funding from the government for the AHP to deliver the target of 35,000 homes that was originally agreed in 2021. And I wanted to know what calculations had gone in behind coming up with this exact figure. So I don't know if that's one for you, Tim. And then maybe, Tom, you might want to come in to follow. Thank you.
I suspect it might be Heather, actually.
It's always the woman who has the real figures and knowledge, let's be honest.
Yes, we had a substantial piece of work done, I think, about 2 years ago, saying to look at exactly what affordable housing costs to build in London and what the subsidy that would be needed is. I think Savills did that work, and so we recently updated all of that work with all of the recent cost data from all of our many research sources in order to populate the 2.2 billion to say what is actually needed to deliver what to get to the 35,000 and beyond. So yes, we have all of that laid out, and we can provide more details if that's helpful.
I think that would be grand. So you feel satisfied that figure matches accordingly what you need? And
absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. And Tom, maybe this is good for you to come in now. I mean, has the government given any indication that they're willing to consider that additional funding?
The government appear to be unwilling to consider any additional funding. Unfortunately, it's while they've given us very welcome flexibilities on the programme, funding appears to be a red line, which is deeply unfortunate because it is the most crucial thing, really.
What can we do to change their mind?
Well, I mean, we've just been sort of touched on briefly the economic case for investment in housing, and I think if anything is going to change this government's mind, and I'm unfortunately pessimistic that it can be changed, but if anything is going to change the government's mind, I think it is this hard economic arguments rather than sort of fluffy social or moral arguments about housing. I think it's going to come down to hard cash. So, what's the cost of the NHS of poor housing? What's the cost to our economy of, kids, education and life chances being hit, by the fact that they're living in poor, overcrowded housing? The cost in terms of housing benefits a very obvious one. Ballooning housing benefit bill because people are having to be housed in the private rented sector rather than social housing. There's enormous cost to the economy that we need to evidence. Unfortunately, I don't think that this government is despite the slogan, is in long-term thinking mode at the moment, perhaps for obvious reasons. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be making the case in the political space more broadly for why investment in affordable housing and social housing is so important.
So you think that economic case hasn't yet been made and is still to be made, or is being made, or it has been made?
I think it has been made on a number of occasions over the years. I just think, like everything, we need to gather the most amount of evidence that we can that's out there, and there is evidence out there. And Fiona mentioned the 15 billion just now for building 100,000 homes. I mean, that's, you know, great evidence. And I think it's about shouting about it because, you know, people need to listen. We've got to get we've got to get into sort of, you know, get an audience, as it were, with the people that can make the decisions on this. And so we've got to keep banging the drum for that economic case.
Because I would agree with you. I think the economic case has been made and is clear. So I think if the economic case is clear, that it more broadly saves money to actually build homes rather than having a kind of like cycle of temporary accommodation that actually is a drain on the economy, you know, decreases people's living conditions, stops them economically contributing. I wonder what the other hurdles are from the government. If the economic case is clear, if the social and moral case is clear, is there something else motivating their lack of wanting to put the appropriate necessary additional funding required to meet the targets?
I mean, it's a really difficult question to answer because, you know, pretty much the entire housing sector is sort of speaking, certainly on the fundamentals, speaking with one voice on what needs to happen, whether it's on funding, on policy certainty, on what needs to go into planning, for example. And nothing really meaningful seems to be changing on that front. So I think it's a very difficult question to answer, what will actually result in a sort of change of direction at this point.
Yeah, Fiona, you've indicated, and I might sort of actually just move into the next question and ask you to answer both, because to yourself, Clare, and probably Hakeem on this, I mean, obviously you've spoken about being supportive more broadly, about seeing the government, you know, give the support that's required. I wondered if the call specifically for 2.2 billion, you were in agreement with that calculation in terms of what was needed from the government to help the GLA deliver the affordable homes alongside you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that that's the right figure if you want to build 35,000. But I think London probably needs closer to 66,000. The current London plan is slightly behind, as it always is, in suggesting 52,000. But if you look at housing need, nationally there are 8.5 million people who are inadequately housed, and that's to do with overcrowding, that's to do with being in homes that don't suit their health conditions or disability. So we have a lot of work to do, and that takes you to a figure that's closer to 4.4 billion is what we really need. Now, I have to say that I find the Secretary of State for levelling up and housing and whatever the letters add up to in Duluck, I've found him very open and amenable to the need for social housing. He gets it. However, there are two things in the way. There is no money. This isn't, nobody's making this up. There isn't a magic money tree hidden somewhere behind the Treasury. Bless you.
Thank you.
But also, I do think for London, the levelling up discussion that quickly divided into a geographical conversation was very, very unhelpful and divisive. What was originally meant by levelling up, in my interpretation of it, was actually about levelling up society generally, income levels, and getting a more equal society in the country turned into a north versus south. So any kind of debate that involves money for London is exceptionally difficult, which is why making that economic case that if you don't solve this in London, we will suck in even more public money than we need to, is probably the strongest one to make.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you, Fiona. And Clare or Hakeem, I don't know if you wanted to add anything either on the wider conversation around, you know, getting the case made to government, or whether you agree with the 2.2 billion figure that's needed to deliver 35,000
Just
homes.
one thought on this. Housing associations, you know, across the country are charging rents that are discounted on the market. If you look at that, how much that discount saves government annually, it is a staggering figure. I can tell you, for Clarion stock, we've got 125,000 homes. That saves the government £10 million a week, because our residents are not paying market rates. And it's using figures like that I think really make the case for further investment in housing.
Okay, thank you. Hakeem, did you want to add anything?
Yes, it's just using the TA, temporary accommodation argument, going further. I mean, what we're spending in temporary accommodation at the moment is just ridiculous. And a number of boroughs, the majority of us in London, are now housing people in commercial hotels, costing us around £150 a night for each household. I mean, if there isn't an argument to be made, I can't imagine what is better, than that. The fact that we're spending, we're paying the highest amount of money for the worst type of accommodation that has, a serious negative effect on the whole household. There isn't just a better argument to be made. But it doesn't seem that anyone's listening to it.
Yes, go for it, Tom.
Specifically on that point, and it is absolutely, tragic for people being housed in hotels. But also, I think there's another economic knock-on impact of that. I read recently it was a council leader of a seaside resort saying their hotels are now all being booked up for people in TA or other people who have a housing need. Tourists can't book them, and therefore it's hitting their local economies. So again, that just points to the as well as the social case, which we know very well, the economic case for investing in social housing.
Yeah, I mean, also the government's proposals to expand PDRs, which would convert hotels as well in London, is just like, it speaks to exactly that, the sort of like very disjointed sort of economic or housing policy that, if you add it all up. Sorry? Don't get me started on PDR either. We'll have a PDR off.
Take it outside.
Sounds like we need to have lunch and talk PDRs, Tom. Okay, Chair, I think I'm done with my questioning. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you. Assembly Member Berry.
I think I covered this earlier on. Sorry, I should have sent a WhatsApp to say this. We asked already what changes have happened in the reprofiling, and then I did my follow-up questions. So I think there's nothing more to add, unless there's anything extra you've changed in the recent changes that you haven't mentioned yet, panel.
No, if you
because we've thoroughly covered
that's fine.
That.
I have a couple of follow-ups then. Just perhaps Hakeem, from your overview of working with boroughs, and maybe Tim as well, are there any boroughs who are winners or losers from the reprofiling? Is there a league table of who's got money and who hasn't?
Well, I mean, there is a league table, but I wouldn't describe it as winners or losers. I think most people negotiated what they thought they could deliver, and as I said earlier, GLA colleagues were willing to accept those new figures with the evidence that was presented, and that's part of the evidence that is now being presented to the government, to hand over more money. I think we're all losers in the sense that we're delivering, or we're looking to deliver much fewer homes than we would have been able to had there been more money or the economic situation hadn't happened.
And Tim, I don't know if you want, or Heather actually as well.
Yeah, well, Heather might want to say more, but I don't think it's not the case that there are boroughs who have asked for things that they haven't got in the rebaselining. So as Hakeem says, generally this is about reducing the amount that can be delivered just simply because of the circumstances that we're in. So I don't think there's anyone who's lost out in that way.
Oh, just to say, obviously, because we had a fixed grant envelope, that everybody's allocations, the homes attached to those allocations obviously inevitably went down. So yes, no winners, sadly.
Okay, wonderful. And then my final question before we adjourn for a break is what benefits and drawbacks are there to allocating the majority of the money early on through strategic bidding? So if we could maybe go this way this time.
So as you may know, partners generally come to us and they bid for what we call an indicative amount. So they say, I'm going to deliver 1,000 homes over 3 years. And then during the period of the programme, they come back to us with a pipeline of projects, and we at the appropriate time we convert those into named projects. And the advantage of that is that once they have their fixed allocation with us, they can go out into increasingly challenging market and see what opportunities that they can bring, and they know they've got the certainty of our grant funding behind them to support those projects, and they can come back and we can move grant around if necessary to assist them to deliver that programme over the 3 years. So that's the key benefit.
Does anybody else have any comments? Or yes, go ahead, Fiona, please.
Thank you. Just to add, that way of doing things is really helpful and gives us some certainty. But there are also sometimes there are opportunistic things that happen, and I've always found that the GLA were open to those conversations, because even within the programme there's always slippage from some part to another, and they've been super helpful at moving things around. Because although, speaking for G15 housing associations, we have very little financial capacity for development at the minute because of all the reasons I've said. We are all each looking at our own balance sheets to see where we can free up money to build, because that's our social purpose, that's what we're here for. So, you know, I'm very hopeful that sometime in the next programme I'll be able to go to the GLA and say, well, I've got more money than I thought I was going to have. What can we do together? And I'm sure you will be, yeah, you're nodding. Yeah, I'm sure they'll be very willing to talk to me, I hope.
Thank you. And then this is just a curiosity. Within the programme, what support is there to other types of development, so cooperative housing, I guess, springs to mind? Or is that something that you're considering a bit further down the line?
I mean, within the 21 to 26 programme, we are really keen to work with all types of housing developers and to have all partners at the table. And we're also very willing, and I think we've demonstrated this over the last few years, to put in the additional sort of work and hand-holding for those projects where we're working with smaller partners, perhaps with people working part-time who don't know the sector that well, who haven't navigated our processes before, to walk them through that. And so we've operated that approach through our community-led housing programme and also through our supported and specialist housing team, because we have a sort of a specialist team who are accustomed to working through particular bespoke projects, for example, with people with mental health issues or domestic abuse survivors and so forth. So we're really keen to have those conversations with everybody who comes to us and help to take them through our programme to a successful conclusion.
Just to add on that, as Heather has said, we have a specialist and supported housing team that specialise in this, and just to add that, of course, following your investigation into supported housing, you made a recommendation that we convene a round table with specialists and supported housing partners, which I'm pleased to say took place a couple of weeks ago, which I chaired, and the outputs from that will help to inform both what the GLA can do in terms of supporting the sector, but also a letter to the Secretary of State about what more we need from the government on that.
Excellent. Very pleased to hear that. Look forward to catching up on that as well. So thank you, everybody. I think we're going to adjourn for about 10 minutes. We'll be back at 11:30. Thank you very much. Just returned from our break. Just one thing to pick up from the previous session. Tom, we've discussed the delays to the programme. Do you anticipate any delays in starts of the 26 programme? The deadline for starts, my apologies.
Oh, the deadline for starts, I was going to say. No, the deadline for the starts remains the 31st of March 2026, and we don't anticipate that changing. I think where we would benefit from flexibility is around completions, because what the completions deadline does, firstly, of course, we're already a couple of years in for the reasons that we've already set out. Secondly, it makes it harder to do longer term schemes like the various state regeneration schemes that the government's told us that we now have to do. If there's a completions deadline of 2029, that limits our ability, that limits partners' appetite, I think, to bid for long-term estate regeneration schemes because they don't have that funding certainty.
Thank you. Assembly Member Devenish.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be told I can now speak rather than not speak. Chair.
You've spoken quite a bit already, I think, Tony.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. You've made my day. Welcome back, everybody. So this is to Clare and Fiona and Hakeem, please. As the delivery partner of the GLA, how would you describe the landscape for affordable housing delivery, and what risks to delivery are you facing? And obviously you don't have to repeat your answers as earlier, maybe just articulate a bit more detail, one of the points on each, please. Thank you.
So I will start with the position of the market and particularly those contractors that we are working with. I think you will be aware that there have been more contractor insolvencies because of the financial position that we are facing than we have ever experienced, and inevitably that will cause delay on particular sites, and I've got 3 sites in London that are currently affected by that. I mean, we've talked already about inflation and interest rates, but we haven't really mentioned planning, which is another factor. The process of securing planning can be painfully slow, and much of that is down to a lack of resource within individual local authorities to take forward plans, and that will bring additional risk into the delivery of homes over the programme period, I think.
Thank you.
So if I just add, I think I've articulated most of it. It's the most difficult landscape I've ever known. On planning, I would urge any new government or current government stop messing around with the planning system. Stick with what you've got, but resource it properly. Local authorities do not have sufficient resource. And one plea is, even if you resource the development control end of planning, it is actually the plan-making bit that brings a community with you, that allows community time to have a conversation about growth, what your place needs for it to be able to function if it accepts growth. So make that plea. The other one for me that we have touched on slightly is skills. I'm really interested in a coordinated approach to skills, particularly at government level. And I think if we have a new government that looks at outcome-based policy making, where you think the outcome is, for example, no child should be born or live in bed and breakfast accommodation. That then gets your education department, whatever bays call themselves these days, DULUC, everyone else together to focus on what's the chain that gets you to that outcome, and part of that is skills. And it isn't, please do not introduce another T level or tinker with A levels or anything else. The system we have, let's just make that work and make it work effectively.
I have to have a plea before Hakeem comes in, a plea that you also perhaps ask the Mayor to do more on skills, and don't always think it's the government has got to solve everything. Actually, we do have a Mayor in this city. Tom may know that. So thank you. Hakeem.
We are actually doing something at London level in terms of skills. We have the housing academy set up by the London Housing Directors to upskill people for development, because Fiona is right, there's a real shortage, and that is a risk to development. To add to the things that we've talked about earlier, one of the biggest risks for local authorities is the HRA's capacity to borrow. Because at this time, the HRA is also facing a number of pressures, needing to invest significantly in existing stock for a number of reasons, because they're old, because of new requirements, new regime, new regulations, and the rent cap, meaning that we've had to pay more to our contractors, but actually getting less rent. So we're reaching a point where even though there isn't a cap in borrowing, because it's prudential borrowing, we have to be able to pay it back, and the payback is revenue, and we just don't have enough revenue to do the other things that we need to do. So that poses a serious risk to being able to deliver our targets.
Thank you. And my next question again, Chair, I think is perhaps partly been answered. So again, if each of the panel just wants to come up with one anecdote rather than a long answer. But the question is, what kind of trade-offs are housing providers having to make when delivering affordable housing as a result of the financial challenge? Unless you've got something new to say, feel free not to say anything. So that's to Clare, Fiona and Hakeem again, please.
So I think we've covered many of the things that I would point to. I mean, these are economic circumstances which are remarkably challenging. And on top of that, for housing associations and for local authorities, we've got additional regulation. And all of that is bringing cost. So whether that's coming through building safety or, additional legislation that's coming through from government, these are piling things on top of organisations that are finding it tough at the moment. So it's no wonder that all of us are feeling a little bit stretched in terms of delivering new homes.
I'll add just one with the subclause, innovation. I've cut my innovation team, so we were doing some really fantastic work looking at off-site manufacturing, looking at how we reduce waste on building sites through work with academic institutions. I can't afford to do that anymore, and a subset of that therefore is the innovation that was going to take us to net carbon zero is at risk because I don't have enough money to do what I need to do.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Hakeem, do you want to?
I was just going to say retrofit or build new homes.
Thank you.
Can do both.
Is that okay, Chair? I've been very short and concise this time. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to say, if I can just follow up. So, as you know, Assembly Member Devenish, it's my job to make sure that everybody gets to speak and to hear from the panellists, not from Assembly members. We don't want one person dominating the meeting. And we need to keep to time and release people so they can go and build homes for us. So with that, I just wanted to come back to just ask you some additional thoughts about the lack of clarity around second staircase requirements for buildings above 18 metres. What impact is that having on delays to schemes? Whoever you want to take that can do that.
Well, I'll come in with the headlines. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, this is currently the biggest block to housing delivery in London. So we are aware of 34,000 homes that are in limbo in the planning system because of this. That's just schemes that are referable to the mayor. So there'll be thousands more homes on smaller schemes all around London that are impacted. We're seeing very few residential planning applications coming to us at the moment other than student accommodation. It's a really, really tricky picture. Well, it's more than a tricky picture. We were promised transitional guidance. Our team in both housing and land and planning have been liaising very closely with DLUC. We've been promised transitional guidance imminently, but it still has not materialised. We think there is going to be quite a long transition period, where previously the Secretary of State had indicated it would be a short transition period. But what's crucial is we get the details of that transition period, and then we get the technical detail of what everyone needs to work towards as quickly as possible, because it's this uncertainty that's killing development at the moment.
I've got 12 current London projects, and 11 of them are affected by the second staircase.
And to what extent, so how far does that push your delivery back?
It will undoubtedly mean there are delays on every single one of those projects.
Okay.
Now, over the life of the programme, you would hope that you would be able to catch up, but it's not a good start.
We've got 3 large schemes that are significantly affected by this in 2 ways. One, the cost of building them has increased significantly. We're talking millions. And secondly, the number of homes on those sites have to be reduced. Now, second staircases, I don't think anyone's going to say it's nonsense, don't do it. It's for good reasons, and we all want to build safe homes. But the government has got to fund the difference, and that is not happening at the moment.
Thank you. Assemblymember Baker.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are, I think it's all sort of variations on a theme, and some of the issues I'm sure you've touched upon, but coming at it from a slightly different angle, because we're talking a lot about what the pressures are and what's going to make it very difficult to deliver. And asking, so Clare, Fiona, Hakeem, what support do you need to ensure delivery? That may be GLA, that may be wider. Obviously, we've talked about clarification around second staircase and things like that. What things do you need in order to ensure that you can deliver this part of the programme? Thanks, Fiona.
Okay, and I don't think I'll attribute them to either GLA or government. The first one we've talked a lot about just now, policy certainty, whether that is second staircase, whether that is what's the future of fossil fuels and gas, planning, stop tinkering and resource properly. On rents, give us certainty in the long term. You gave us a formula, but you only stuck to it for, 4 out of 10 years. Also, I'm really interested in things like what are you doing with Help to Buy receipts? So people are starting to pay back Help to Buy now. That's worth about 25 billion. With it's returned with about a 3% return. That could be a really interesting pump priming fund for long-term regeneration schemes, infrastructure investment. I think that was an outcome-based policy making. So think about that long-term policy. I think that's me.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I think the most important thing is rents, to be honest, because in our world, most other things are constrained, and if you have certainty on your income levels, you therefore can plan for the long term. You know what your borrowing capacity is likely to be, and therefore you know how much resource you can put into supporting new projects. And without that, with a year-on-year interference in rents, it just becomes desperately uncertain, and our boards feel that the situation is too risky in order to take those longer term decisions, and that's what impacts ultimately on our ability to deliver the programme.
Thank you. Hakeem.
Without wanting to repeat what colleagues have said, because I entirely agree with them, the only thing I would add is perhaps the government and the GLA, and there are discussions around this, could front purchase things that developers need to build homes, so that reduces the risks that they plan into their tenders. And if the price of the tenders reduce, then it increases our ability to build more homes.
Can I just ask what sort of things you mean? Apologies, I've been off the Housing Committee for a few years. A few months, sorry.
There are some basic things that all builders need, bricks.
Physical resources, correct, basically. Correct. So like making sure the pipeline is there.
Like a guaranteed purchase that we guarantee, the next 10 million bricks at this price, and then everybody bids into it, and that's fixed, which means there are no risks around those issues.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you very much. Thank you for indulging me. Over to Tom and Tim and Heather. So what do you see the biggest risk? Again, these are all variations on themes, but we want to make sure we absolutely ask all the questions. What is the biggest risk to delivering the target number of starts under the current Affordable Homes programme, would you say?
I mean, the biggest, as I mentioned, the biggest barrier at the moment is the second staircase issue, and the longer that runs on, the more knock-on damage there is in terms of schemes being delayed. But hopefully, that will be, if we get the long-promised transitional arrangements, that will at least be resolved shortly. I just think the macroeconomic circumstances are probably overall the biggest issue. The rise of the inflation, the materials costs, all of that. But so much stuff is layering on top of each other at the moment. I think that's the thing. It's been one thing after another.
Thanks. Tim, Heather, do you have anything to add to
just
that?
the only thing that I would add is interest rates. Just that I think everybody's modelling on hoping that interest rates are going to start to dip. If that doesn't happen, or indeed goes in the other direction, I think lots of our partners will tell us about increased risk there, and particularly local authorities who are asking for some certainty on the rates at which they can borrow to assist them with their development programme. They're making that case through the task force.
I think just on that, I think one of the things we are pushing for is that longer-term, low-cost public works loans board interest rates, which would really help local councils who have been massively hit. I mean, one local council told me, and one London council told me, that just the extra borrowing costs on their programme came to £200 million as a result of rising interest rates. Just the extra borrowing costs, which is extraordinary. Sorry, Tim.
Just to add one thing which hasn't been raised yet, I don't think, which is investor confidence, I think, which is obviously relevant for developers and potentially housing associations as well. But, you know, all of this added together, particularly the uncertainties around future policy, we're hearing more and more is affecting investor confidence. So I just add that to the list.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Tim. And to follow up on that, what mitigations are you or can you put in place for this programme in terms of those, very challenging and fluctuating economic circumstances?
I think we've already covered quite a lot of these. So the flexibilities around the programme being the key thing, being able to do estate regeneration projects and things like that. I think Tim might.
Well, it's my 3 levels again.
Three levels,
think it's the project level stuff. It's the working every single day between the partners and the trust and the confidence between the teams to be able to come up with enough reassurance to allow providers to continue with projects where they possibly can. And that's kind of working within the parameters of the programme, and then the next level is seeking to change the parameters of the programme where we think they need to continue to be changed. We've already had some significant changes and they've been welcome, but we think there are some more that we need. And then it's that bigger strategic picture. It's that long-term certainty and flexibility, which Clare has mentioned, and I totally agree with. That's the kind of overarching message, really.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Berry.
Yeah, I just wanted to join up a few things that you've all said, actually. Fiona, you mentioned, you've had to cut back on the resource you're putting into organising around the circular economy, essentially. Hakeem, you mentioned, wouldn't it be nice if we could get bricks on a guaranteed price? And we have here the chair of the Planning and Regeneration Committee, where we're discussing recommendations relating to things like making, organising at a London level to make materials that are for reuse available to people. So, Tom, is that something that's obviously Planning and Regen comes under a different deputy mayor, but are you trying to link up the practical work that you do? You're much closer to the ground in terms of practicalities around development with the emerging new policies around reducing carbon and reusing materials.
Well, we always try and make sure that we're joined up completely between what's happening on the housing and land side and what's happening on the planning side. I mean, housing and land colleagues feed into what the London Plans team thinking is.
But on the practical side, are you thinking about things like what Hakeem was suggesting?
In terms of, I think it's a really interesting idea, and I'm not aware it's been done before in terms of the government, say, coming in and saying, right, we're going to go into the market, buy a load of building materials and then make it available. I'd be interested to know if other governments around the world had taken that particular step. But we've got to get a grip on this. One thing that struck me in the briefing I have for today is that London has the highest build cost in the world of any city other than Geneva. Now, we have to wonder why that, I think we have to see it. That can't just be to do with London. There must be a national issue here. But I think it's something that collectively and with government support we need to be really looking at, because it can't be that we can't do any better than this, surely, as a country.
Yeah, and we're doing quite a lot of building. You think we'd be able to mobilise some economies of scale. So that's the sort of thing.
I mean, I have to say, it's what time are we? 11:51. I can't believe that Brexit hasn't had an impact on our ability to sort of. Like, I thought that would wake Tony up. See, I knew it would wake him up.
Yes, but that's when you're operating.
I want to find a charity.
So that's when you're operating on global markets. But if you're talking about local reuse of materials, that's something that's Brexit free, and also something that's quite practical. I don't know. Let's.
It's certainly one that we should. I think we should look at. Sorry, Tim.
Just one quick point, which comes back to this flexibility point. You know, at the moment, the way we can use our resources is really quite constrained. It's within a programme where we have an MOU with government, and we're allowed to subsidise providers in a particular way. You know, I think more flexibility in general would be a good thing to be able to explore innovative approaches like this. We wouldn't be able to do it under the current framework.
Can I add as well? I mean, we have tried to use our programmes in order to drive MMC, for example. Unfortunately, what we've seen recently, actually, we have not seen MMC take off in the way that I think a lot of us kind of
do you want to expand that abbreviation for the watching public?
Correct, sorry, that's absolutely right. As I remember, modern methods of construction. So, you know, if you take volumetric modular, for example, L&G have just closed. I think their factory was their factory volumetric. I think they've just closed it down, unfortunately, and we've not seen. It is being used, but I don't think it's seen the take-up that perhaps we would have hoped, and that could have helped fill a gap, you know, given constraints in supply of traditional building materials.
Assemblyman Barrow, I think Hakeem wanted to come.
Sorry, yes, I was trying to finish because I've gone off target rather as far as the questions are concerned.
I just wanted to clarify what I said about materials. And the reason I specifically refer to the government rather than the GLA, because the GLA is restricted on how it can use the money that it's given by the government. And when I refer to the government, I wasn't thinking that they should go and buy the bricks, but to say to people who manufacture the bricks that, you know, the government guarantees an income level for them, which enables them to make a certain number of bricks and make them available at a certain price. And because of that quantity, it means that, you know, there is the economy of scale, and it's not a new thing. It can be done if we put our mind to it.
I think that's really important. I have in my mind, and this is very anecdotal, and I can't remember where I heard it from, but something that during the 2009 recession, we lost our last brick factory or something like that, shut down. And one of the problems we've got with, and it goes back to long-term funding certainty, is with these programs that go like this, if you've not got that certainty in your supply chain, it can make it very vulnerable to this. So if we had that counter-cyclical funding, which we would all like, it would help us to keep, you know, business, you know, construction businesses, you know, I think in business during these very difficult times.
Sure, thank you. And sorry, Hakeem, I didn't mean to sort of. I sort of took your point and took it somewhere else. And I'm definitely not suggesting we use affordable housing grant for this. This would be something we'd find somewhere else in the GLA.
Yeah, price guarantees. That's a good idea. So my question is to Tom, Tim, and Heather. And if this has already been covered, then feel free to say so. So how is the GLA supporting its delivery partners for the 21-26 programme? I think we have covered most of it.
I can't think of anything else that we haven't already
No, that's fine.
mentioned, really.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So then the next question's back to you, Sean.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we've talked a little bit about this already, but you do currently have a fixed deadline for completions. You said potentially that might be moved. So can you tell us a bit more about that? What types of schemes do you think will come in before the deadline? And how long will it be before you start to extend it? Because I know the last scheme jumped 2 years in total at the end.
To be clear, it's not in our gift to extend it. So I said it might be helpful if the government were so minded to extend it. It's not in our gift. So what that deadline does is obviously restrict schemes coming in, quite obviously, that would complete beyond that, and that would include, for example, the sort of estate regeneration schemes that the government have now said that they want us to bring in. So I think that's the key constraint that's brought in by that. But to be clear, that deadline is there and will be there, so long as the government decides that it should be.
Yeah, because it's curious they didn't extend the deadline at the same time as doing regeneration, because those schemes do take a very long time. We're looking at the completions for the 2016 to 23 extending into the 2030s easily because of schemes like that.
Yes, absolutely. So, as I say, it does operate as a constraint on what delivery partners are able and willing to bring in.
So we'll get a new. We do know the spending profile, expected pending spending profile of the previous scheme. Will you be giving us that at some point for the new scheme, the spending profile, not the completion?
I think some figures will go to Budget Committee. I think I'll defer to.
It does get reported to Budget Committee.
I think it gets reported to Budget Committee.
Eventually.
Is that right?
Yes, we're finalising our reports at the moment. I think it's largely based on the starts and completions,
Yes.
but obviously we're also looking at spend. But it's actually very difficult to predict for this particular programme until the second staircase issue is resolved. So we're obviously, unfortunately, expecting the programme to be backloaded. And I would love to sort of guarantee the forecasts for 25-26, but it's quite difficult to pin down at this moment.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem, thank you. So my question is to Clare, Fiona and Hakeem. With 3 years left to go on the AHP to 26, is it really feasible that funding will be used to deliver estate regeneration?
Well, I have one of the largest estate regeneration programmes in London. It is split up inevitably into much smaller phases, and I know my team have been talking to the team here about what opportunities might exist, and I definitely think there are some that could be delivered within this programme. It's inevitably going to be tight. But, that is the demolition of 1,000 homes across 3 estates and the rebuilding of 3,000 homes, which will transform the lives of many of the social housing residents there, because I have nearly 30% overcrowding in those homes. So any opportunity to get some grant funding in to accelerate that programme would be absolutely worthwhile.
Could I just add, from L&Q's point of view, we don't have any oven-ready schemes for this, but the fact that it's back on the agenda is brilliant, because these things do take a long time, and the most important bit of the conversation is with existing residents in those areas, and how you have that conversation. You don't do that quickly, but it's back to that point about certainty. We need to know that that's going to be around for the long term, so we can have those confident conversations with people.
The short answer from me is no, but it's sad, because we had an estate regeneration program going on before it was taken away, and if it hadn't been taken away, that would have continued until now. But the macroeconomic issues that we've been talking about has now delayed that program to the point that I cannot guarantee that we can kick off any of the next phases by 2026.
Okay, and so I'm just intrigued. So presumably, so you're a hard no. Clare, there is some scope, but with the additional funding, if it were possible, would that change the profile of the tenure of homes that you were to bring forward in the additional 2,000?
I don't think it would. What it would mean is we would be able to accelerate various aspects of it, and we are committed to the replacement of all the social homes first. That's the way our programme works. So it would inevitably mean that individual residents would be moving into more appropriate accommodation quicker.
Thanks. And to Tom, Tim and Heather, although if you have thoughts, the rest of the panel, please do chip in. We've talked on the committee before about supported accommodation and targets around that. So within the 21-26 programme, what are your views on the feasibility of meeting the supported housing target?
So to be clear, the supported housing target was initially set by the government at 10%. The initial bidding round produced nothing like what we would need in terms of meeting that target. The government has since reduced that to 1%. And I think that the lack of interest in bidding from partners, I think, is not down to a lack of a desire to provide specialist and supported housing. I think a lot of it, as we've discussed when you were doing this investigation as a committee, is down to particular lack of revenue support that comes with it, which we do have with certain other programmes, and we get bids into those programmes because they, like SHAP, for example, single homelessness accommodation programme, because it comes with that revenue funding. The AHP doesn't. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are doing a review into specialist and supported housing, the round table, which I chaired the other day, which is a recommendation from yourselves. That that was part of that review, and this will be making recommendations to the government as well as allowing us to, as well as getting views on what the GLA can do differently within our existing powers and budgets to support that very important form of housing.
Yes, no, just to say, to echo all of that, in an incredibly risky market, it's hard to ask partners to enter into an even more risky part of the housing market. But there is lots and lots of work going on to bring in whatever projects that we can with our partners, what we ask is just come to us and say what you need and what would unlock, and who we can link you to, and how we can support through the process. And we hope that at the end these very important projects will come through. And an example of that is because we have a new domestic abuse duty, and we have a revenue funding attached to that, which we're delighted to have. And we're attaching to that a small capital programme so that we can run those two things in parallel to support survivors of domestic abuse. So where we can, we're pushing it forward.
Just to add that Heather's point is absolutely vital. These schemes don't go ahead without the revenue, and often revenue is expected to come from local authorities, and I think we've been around this one a few times. Local authorities simply don't have the money. We at L&Q run the UK's only facility for women with learning difficulties leaving domestic and other abuse. We have one facility in all of UK for 7 women at a time. Surely we can do better than that.
Okay. That is, I mean, this is not really a question, but that kind of speaks to the point that Hakeem made about £60 million being spent on inappropriate housing. What conversations are there happening to square that circle, that it seems almost we need that housing, but it seems pointless to have the target if no one can actually do it, because it can't, once it is built, no one can keep those facilities open. Is there, as part of that, the round table or the work that the GLA is doing, is there conversation to close that loop?
Well, this is exactly what the review that we are undertaking is going to be really helpful in terms of setting out, both for ourselves and for the government. But once again, returning to this point around that it's absolutely crucial that we get that revenue funding attached to these programmes.
Thank you all. I was going to ask Tony if he wanted to ask any more questions, but he's left, so there we are. No. Thank you all for attending today.
Thank you.
For all of your feedback. You can leave if you want to. We just have some other items of business, but we'll be 2 minutes. So can we note our work programme for 2023-24 Assembly year and the additional activity undertaken since our last meeting, namely the temporary accommodation site visit on the 19th of September 2023. Noted. Great. The date of the next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 15th of November 2023 at 2 p.m. here in the chamber at City Hall. And can we also note the report and today's discussion? Noted. Okay, so I have no urgent business, and I therefore declare this meeting closed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.